What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box, and this is weird because we're talking about a Codemasters game, and this channel is dedicated to sim racing. So why are we talking about a Codemasters game? Well, that Codemasters game is Dirt Rally, which was released just a couple of days ago to early access. This is still in development; things are subject to change, and it's actually worth putting on this channel because this is the best damn rally game in the last decade. That is a heck of a statement for a game that is in early access, a game that is being done by Codemasters, and a game that's said to be aiming for realism. Nothing about this feels right. But you know what? I kind of like it. Dirt Rally is the next game in the Dirt franchise from Codemasters, but it has absolutely nothing to do with the Dirt franchise from Codemasters because this one actually aims to have some level of realism. And it actually does deliver some level of realism, which we'll talk about a little bit later on in the video. This is more along the lines of a return to roots to the original comic Ray Rally games. There's a bit more realism here, there's rally racing, and there's more rally racing. If you don't like rally racing, this isn't the game for you because it is all about rally racing, which is the way a rally racing game should be, right? Now in the future there will be rallycross as well as hill climb, but again, it's a rally game. That is what this is about, the rally experience, which, fortunately, this is also the most realistic rally game since Richard Burns' Rally. Granted, that's not setting the bar very high, but it definitely is an achievement. So let's start talking about the game itself. Remember, this is early access, things are subject to change, there will be improvements made, and there's definitely a lot of improvements to be made, which I'll talk about later on in the video again. But, yeah. I think we have a clear direction as to what this title is and what it's aiming to be and what it's claiming to be aiming for. It's just a question of, will Codemasters actually be able to follow through, which, good gravy, that's a scary question. So, speaking of delivery, is this game a sim? And I'm not going to answer that question because it's a roundabout, circular discussion. There are some elements that are reasonably good, very solid, realistic. Cars behave as you would mostly expect them to, but it still needs some tweaking, it still needs some polishing before I would really categorize it as a sim. However, at the same time, I'll also say there's a couple games out there that feature circuit racing on tarmac that are probably just as unrealistic, but yet we consider them sims without too much of an issue, so maybe it's a double standard, I don't know. And really, it comes down to the surface that you are driving on in this game. There are a multitude of different surfaces, obviously being a rally game, and they all feel unique and individual. For example, the Greek rally stages consist of heavy gravel, medium gravel, looser surfaces. The cars are going to drive more sideways, you're going to have more of an issue putting the power down, more wheel spin, and things like that. You move over to the Wales rally stages, those feature a lighter gravel mixture, which are basically more compacted surfaces. The car doesn't move around as much. And then you move over to Monte Carlo, where obviously being Monte Carlo, you have tarmac, wet tarmac, snow, and ice happening all at the same time. And these surfaces actually feel unique and individual. You can tell which surface you are on, and that will affect the way that your car handles. And really, I think it depends on the surface that you are driving on. In my opinion, the Greek rally stages with the lower grip surfaces are the best in the game from a driving standpoint. The car wants to slide, you're balancing the car, you're using all of your inputs. You know, you're not just driving with just your steering wheel, you're also now using your throttle pedal and your brake pedal, not just to go or stop, but also to, control the car and control the car's attitude. It's on those stages that I'm most pleased with the game, and I'm thinking this game really can deliver a realistic depiction of what it's like to drive a rally car. Maybe not necessarily absolutely perfect, but as good as we're probably going to get in the foreseeable future, given the fact that it's literally been a decade since anyone has actually tried to make a rally game that has any level of simulation in it. But then I'll take even the same exact car to the Wales rally stages, which feature the more grippy gravel that is available. And it's at that point, it just feels like you lose something. The cars aren't as happy to go sideways, they don't move around as naturally. It almost feels like you're driving on tarmac to a degree. It's just not quite the same type of experience. And I will say, this being early access, this is something that hopefully can be changed. What I would like to see changed is basically taking the loosest grip setting available within the game, the heavy gravel, the Greek stages, and making that the new baseline grip setting for all of the stages. I think that would really go a long way to improving the gravel experience within this game, because it does drive more naturally, more normally as you'd expect, and it's not necessarily more difficult, it's just different. You know, a lot of times when you talk about lower grip surfaces, people instantly go, that's gonna make it ice. No, ice feeling is nothing to do with the amount of grip that is available within the game, but rather the presentation of the grip within the game. And there is a big difference between the two, and as it is right now with the Greek stages, I don't have any fears about going into ice territory if they make those stages even less grippy. I just don't. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the gravel driving experience within this game, because I think there is a lot of potential here. It's just a question of whether or not that potential will be utilized. In terms of the tarmac stages, the cars change directions really quick. They're really twitchy. They go around corners really quick. It's really quick. There's a lot of grip there, which is precisely pretty much the exact same thing I'd say about Richard Burns Rally, where I absolutely hated the French rally stages, so much so that usually the first thing that I did was try and go 120 miles an hour into a hairpin and hope that my car was totaled, because I hated driving those stages, which is pretty much exactly the same way I feel about the tarmac within this game. So yeah, I can't really give you any sort of judgment on that, other than the fact that, hey, I hate it just as much as Richard Burns Rally for the exact same reason that I hate it in Richard Burns Rally. So if that's your idea of perfection on a rally car on tarmac stages, well, good enough for me, I guess. Sorry. But onto the cars themselves, there's a wide variety of cars, and they actually all feel different, and they have their own personalities. For example, the Mini. I was actually quite surprised to see that this thing hunts around the surface like a three-legged dog. It bounces all over the place, and you're constantly being thrown around. It feels like a tiny, small, lightweight car with a very small wheelbase. And, I get that same feeling that I get watching, old footage of Minis back in the day, rallying, where they're kind of bouncing around, with the rear ends just kind of hopping around, the cars hunting around on the road. You get the same type of feeling. You see the same type of thing. The 80s rear-wheel drive cars, which have become my favorite because of one car in particular. The E30 M3, my favorite car within the game right now at this stage. It drives around more. It's nimble on its feet compared to, the Escort that's in its class, which has a little bit more power, but it's not quite as nimble. The Escort kind of wants to go into understeer a little bit more frequently, while as the E30, I can flick around a little bit more, and I can work the car, a bit more. The Group B cars, the Peugeot 205 T16, or whatever the heck it's called, the Peugeot Group B car that is available within this game. That car just feels awkward and clunky because it's an awkward and clunky little car. It's a beast to handle. It has its quirks. Where then I go to the RS200, which is my favorite car after the E30, and that thing slides around like nobody's business. It's happy. It's willing to comply. It doesn't necessarily have the same type of personality, other than its personality is, let's have a whole heck of a lot of fun and let's get the job done. You can feel the differences between the cars, which is definitely something that I expect to experience within something that is claiming to be a simulation. In terms of car setup, it was something I was initially quite disappointed in. It's the basic standard slider settings where, do you want to make your gearing shorter or taller? Do you want to have more rear brake or more front brake? The general slider things that don't really tell you anything about what's going on or what it's changing, and it doesn't really give you any level of control beyond just changing some slider that changes who knows what. Then you unlock the advanced setup options, which are kind of a sub-menu within the menus, which enable you to change more things and with greater details. For example, changing the brakes goes from just front or rear to your brake bias as well as your brake pressure. The differential goes from loose or tight to being able to control, the power side differential, the coast or braking differential as it's called in this game, and the preload, if I'm not mistaken. And many cars even have multiple differentials as you would expect. that's one of the things that I really was quite shocked with and actually quite pleased with, because as a sim, I would expect to see realistic options available right there. The one thing that I don't quite like, though, on the car setup front, you don't have the ability to select your tires, which is kind of something that is a bit of a bummer, especially given that this game does have weather, which can open up some interesting gameplay options. For example, if one of the later stages before the service area is going to be a rainy stage, maybe I want to take a tire that's better suited for wet conditions. This is something that wasn't in Richard Burns Rally, and it was something that created a heck of a lot of fun in a better dynamic rally environment, more or less, which, especially when you're talking about online gameplay, can be really cool because it adds different options and things like that. So it'd be cool to see something like that added in the future. Wrapping up the handling and the physics portion of this video, you know, I'll put it this way. When it's at its best, it's probably going to surprise a lot of people with how good it can be. When it's at its worst, it's probably no worse than Gran Turismo or the Forza series. You know, you get that experience, but you don't necessarily get the full-featured, full-on experience that you can get. You know, this is early access. There's still things to be improved, and I do think it could be improved. It's just a question of will it, which is a pretty big question. And given the fact that this is a sim racing-based channel, I know I'm going to have that inevitable Richard Burns Rally elitist, which I'm going to say this. I'm going to speak to that guy specifically because I know there's a lot of those guys watching this video right now. Richard Burns Rally came out a decade ago. We've been playing Richard Burns Rally for a decade. We will continue to play Richard Burns Rally, probably for another decade, because there are things in that game that make it the uncompromising, full-on, hardcore, brutally difficult, probably to an overly extreme setting type of experience, because that's what we love, that's what we enjoy, that's why we're sim racers in general anyways, because it's absolutely uncompromising and it won't hesitate to kick you in the face multiple times over, and that's what we enjoy. This game is not going to obsolete Richard Burns Rally. This game should be viewed for those people, for myself, as a game to augment your options available for your rally racing, you know, to give you more rally racing more often. You know, you don't necessarily always want to fire up Richard Burns Rally and just absolutely be destroyed multiple times over. Sometimes you just want a more low-key experience. You know, I think that is something that this game can very well offer for people like those. Like, honestly, I'd put it this way almost. If you're looking at this and you're making the comparison to Richard Burns Rally and how it stacks up to Richard Burns Rally is all that matters to you, then this isn't the game for you. You've kind of already missed what this game can offer to you as a title that is not Richard Burns Rally. Because honestly, I think for a lot of people, Richard Burns Rally has been put up on a pedestal, and no matter what comes out, even if it is actually factually more realistic and it could be verified, which I'm not saying it is, people just have it ingrained in their mind that it's Richard Burns Rally. That is all that matters because it's been around for so long at this point. So there you go. Hopefully you'll have a better understanding. Yes, that was really long-winded, but that's what we do here because that's kind of what sim racing is about. Force feedback and steering wheel support is in massive need of improvement. Right now, the force feedback by default, the effects file that they give you within the game is pretty much apparently set up for gamepad users, which means that if you use a steering wheel, you will have an extraordinarily loose feeling on center of your steering wheel, which really sucks and put a damper on it. You do have a couple of options to tweak that setting. Codemasters does supply some settings that they suggest, but those settings are pretty much garbage. Now, the good news is there's a file out there already for this game that changes some of those values that are set up for gamepad users into more steering wheel friendly values, which makes the force feedback much, much better. Not necessarily the best force feedback ever, certainly in need of improvement still, but given that there are a multitude of options of settings to change within that file outside of the game, I do think eventually we'll kind of hone in on what type of force feedback settings we need to be using within this game. So I think there is potential to have a decent feel out of the game, although not necessarily the absolute pinnacle of force feedback. But the steering wheel support right now is kind of a little bit lackluster, and I think this is just one of those early access things. personally. You know, the steering wheel in-game, the visual steering wheel rotation is limited to 90 degrees one direction or the other, which is extraordinarily weird and awkward to drive with from the cockpit, because there's no way to turn off the visual steering wheel or the hands that are, you know, basically thrown into the cockpit view. But there's that, as well as the fact that you can't change the steering lock, which means that you have to select the steering range that you would like on your steering wheel, and it's really kind of recommended that you're anywhere between 270 degrees and about 400, 450. Personally, I'm using about 360 or 400, and that's netting a pretty good, solid, reasonable steering ratio. So I would like to see that improved. Obviously, now in this day and age where most wheel users are going to have a 900-degree steering wheel available, you know, it's something that I think the game should really support pretty much out of the box. But again, I do think this is kind of one of those early access things, and hopefully they'll realize that they need to fix this. Because again, it might be acceptable for the type of games that Codemasters generally makes, but if this is going to be a sim and going to be taken seriously as one, it's going to also have the same judgment applied to it. So fix it. Okay, on to the rest of the game, and perhaps equally as important as physics in a rally game, stage design. Because after all, even if it had the most uncompromising, most hardcore, most insanely realistic physics, if the stages were approximately 20 miles wide, it really would pretty much be dull, boring, and pretty much suck overall, because that just wouldn't be rally. And I'm pleased to report that the rally stages actually feel like rally stages. As in, the roads change in width, you know, you're going over crests and bumps, jumps and yumps and things like that. There's a variety of different corners. It doesn't feel like these stages were designed by a chalkboard with, you know, we have to have 3 hairpin lefts, 1 hairpin right, we have to have a 2 left long, we have to have a 3 right don't cut rock inside into a 2 left. You know, there's none of that. They actually feel like stages. They actually feel reasonable, you know. And there is a good variety, and the stages are of a proper width. Maybe a little bit too wide, but it's not necessarily so problematic that I'm all that concerned by it. However, there is also the downside that frequently you will see the same area. And this isn't as in, oh, they've just used the same sections of a course on a different course, but rather each area is pretty much kind of around 2 or 3 different hubs, to put it simply. As in, you know, you'll start in one location, and maybe the first 2 kilometers at 2 different stages of the same exact stage, basically, and then you'll reach a junction, and one stage takes a left at that junction, the other stage takes a right at that junction, and you go down different paths and things like that, which I think is probably not necessarily that unrealistic or not that unreasonable, but is something that I'd like to bring up and make aware to some people, because that is something that is kind of unfortunate. It does kind of put a damper on it, although otherwise, besides that, I would say that the stage design is pretty good within this game, and I'm definitely excited to see what they can bring in the future. Stage lengths do vary quite a bit. There are some stages that are short, some stages that are long, in the region of probably being about 7 or 8 minutes or somewhere thereabouts, depending on what car you're driving, obviously, which, honestly, I'm pretty pleased to see that the general response that I've seen from the community on the stage lengths is actually pretty positive in favor of having longer stages, and hopefully we'll see some even longer stages, because who wouldn't like a badass 30-kilometer long finish rally stage? Come on, let's make it happen. Or even better, just go totally full on crazy, going all in on the crazy. Give us a safari rally stage. Let's make it happen. Come on, Codemasters. Ante up. Come on, do it. Do it. You know you want to do it. Just do it. Just do it. Come on, do it. Okay, some more things that we won't cover in as much detail as the other things, which are much more important in my opinion. The graphics look fantastic. Absolutely amazing. The effects are fantastic. You know, night rally racing is awesome. You know, it's well done, and it's something that is highly enjoyable, because yeah, it's enjoyable to scream through a forest in the middle of night with only the lights to guide your way. It also runs fantastically on my system, which I've listed all the specs in my channel about section if you're interested. Basically, it's a 4-year-old system with a GTX 670 thrown in it. I can run this game on high settings pretty much all day at 1080p and not worry about frame rate at all, because we're well above 60 pretty much regardless of the conditions. It'll be interesting to see if that changes once Rallycross is added, which at that point you'll have multiple cars on screen at the same time. But as it is right now in the rally stages, it gets the seal of approval. Pace notes are pretty well done and they are useful. They do use the numbering system where a 6 corner is the fastest corner and a 1 is a tight corner, and then you obviously have hairpins underneath that as well. So if you're put off by that system, well, you're pretty much screwed. Or if you like that system, it's good to see. It's pretty standard, pretty usable. I think most people are fairly comfortable and confident with this system anyways. But just worth noting, as well as the fact that there's only 3 distance for call-out options available, being short, medium, and far, basically, in terms of how close to the corner you are before the pace note is called by your co-driver, which I would like to see a little bit more granularity in the controls there and have more ability to tweak just how early is to make me a more comfortable driver, because it is, as it is on the normal setting by default right now, it is very easy to actually outrun the pace notes, even in something like a Mini. But I guess that's just the game's way of telling you that you're really on it. In terms of the pace notes themselves, they're recorded nicely. Every now and then you'll actually notice that the co-driver kind of fumbles a little bit. I don't know if this is a bug that's just 2 notes conflicting with one another and overlapping and causing the game to kind of temporarily freak out a little bit or something, or if it's actually intended. But it's really cool when you hear this happen, and it's just one of those nice little immersion features and a nice little humanistic touch, more or less. It doesn't happen frequently, it doesn't happen all the time, but it's something that when it happens, you'll notice it happens, and it's cool, okay? Yes, it's a weird thing to point out in a video like this, but it's still cool to see that happen. Your co-driver is not a robot, he is a person, he has feelings. In terms of damage, yeah. As it is right now, maybe I haven't found the magical setting that they've buried somewhere, because it seems like they've kind of done that with this game. I haven't really had a crash that has ended my rally right then and there on the spot, even though I've had a few big ones. You can end your stage on the spot by throwing it off of a cliff, but in terms of hitting something and having a car that's too damaged to continue, haven't seen that happen yet in my experience, and I've hit a couple of gates at a high rate of speed that definitely should have ended my rally. This is something, though, that I wouldn't necessarily expect out of the box from a Codemasters game or a game that's intending to sell semi-decently, so it's not necessarily shocking. And I will say that the F1 series from Codemasters as well also apparently has a realistic damage mod, which cranks up the damage to a more reasonable fashion in that game. So it very well could be something that in the end will actually be tweakable by the user, in which case I would expect we'd see realistic damage mods where it's possible to basically end your rally on a spot by having too serious of a crash. In terms of effect that you get from damage, not really done all that well. Not really a big factor at this stage in the game. Hopefully that is something that will be improved. There's definitely room for improvement within the damage modeling and the way that affects the cars. As it is right now, the game does feature a pretty basic career mode where you can actually, probably most notably, upgrade your team. You can buy faster cars and you'll win rewards and everything as you win rallies and progress and things like that, as expected. But the cool little feature that I found, or something that I would like to just bring up at least, is you can actually upgrade your team, and this will actually have an effect on your rally. For example, as you get a better team with more capable team members, you know, service at the service portions of the rally, you know, will actually go by significantly quicker. When you first start out, the car will take forever to repair, and you'll be able to maybe do 4 points of repair throughout the entire car before your 30 minutes are up, whereas once you get a more capable crew available, you can start to kind of work on the car a bit more, which makes a difference. So nothing to write home with on the career mode, but still something to keep you playing the game. There is one more thing to talk about, but that literally speaks for itself, and we'll put that at the end of the video. We're going to wrap things up here, though. Hopefully this video has helped determine what this game is and how it relates to you and your racing gameplay, and whether or not this game's for you or not. Again, this is early access. Things are subject to change. There's some improvement to be made. This is by no means a review. We will continue to take a look at this game throughout its early access because I'm quite excited for this game. I mean, literally, it's been a decade since we've had a rally game that I've actually been interested in playing. So again, this isn't a review. We're going to continue to take looks at this game. Really, the purpose of this video is to hopefully help you understand what this game means to you if you are someone who isn't playing this game already, to make that determination for yourself. So with that said, I'm going to end my commentary here and literally let things speak for themselves. So hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.
Into right 4 over crest, into caution, right 5 over crest, jump maybe, gate, and hairpin left. Crest 60. Right 6 over crest, and crest, down. Right 4 continues for 90, keep in through dip. Into right 6, long over crest, into hairpin left. Crest, right 6 over crest, into left 6 over crest 60, left 5 over crest 60, into left 6 80, keep right over jump 100. Caution, keep mid over jump, into right 5 half long over bump, keep in 80, right 6, keep in 80, left 6, keep in crest 100, right 6 half long, and caution, right 2 deceptive. And right 6 80, caution crest, immediate turn open hairpin left. Crest 60, left 4 long dip, into left 5 over crest, dip crest, and caution keep right over crest posts, left 3 long through posts and opens, keep right over crest, continues past junction, caution 100 down past junction, open hairpin right. Left 6 60, care left 6, right 6 80, caution left 6 crest, into right 3 long go cut 60, caution right 6 keep in, crest, into left 5 long 60, left 6 150 crest, jump maybe, keep left over crest jump and keep mid over crest and right 6, and left 6 keep left over crest, into right 6 keep in, crest, into left 6, into right 6 60 keep left over crest, care crest, into right 3 long keep in, 60, crest, left 6, and right 5 half long, through dip 100, left 5 half long keep in, 170 over crest, caution crest, into left 5 and right 4 long, over bump 150, right 6 and left 6, and right 5 long, keep right over crest, 60, right 6 60, keep left over crest, and right 6 continues for 100 and tightens hairpin right. Into bump left 4, into right 4 half long, into left 6, into left 6, and left 6 jump to finish.